Morning, everyone, and thank you very much for your time. I'll just push that. I've got a slightly taller head than the others. To my previous esteemed colleagues, I also thank you. My aim is today to introduce a 5-star training program for drivers, and that is, it's time that we change that paradigm from an instruction system. And it's bridging that gap between the desk and the steering wheel. And it took me, as you've heard, 7 years to develop globally, working with educators and behaviorists and psychologists, engineers. And it's that whole system where, as my esteemed colleagues have mentioned, we've got a significantly different infrastructure or environment. The cars or vehicles have changed dramatically over 50 years, yet education seems to have remained stagnant in the 70s, being that driver-instructor mode. And it's having that change with education. So we have here a learner driver, and currently we have a graduated licensing system. We've given him a totally different car, and the roads are certainly getting better, significantly better. But what we're talking about is a graduated education system. And that means changing the entire system we're delivering by using a driver coach rather than an instructor, because the coach then changes what they deliver. So they're looking to match their learning style or delivery style to the client. And then using coaching methodology, and you'll find all the references on our website, but the Hermes report was a great place to start, where we really internationally looked at why we're delivering instruction when we know it's not an effective methodology for training any multitask discipline or continual partial assessment. So then we looked at what we're actually delivering and the curriculum. And it's funny because in Australia, we have the curriculum could be driving around a test route. Nothing can happen, and you get familiar with a test route, but you don't actually understand the question, the answer, and therefore it's very difficult to understand what you're doing. We then moved on from the curriculum and looked at the environments we're using, and that comes back to that graduated education system. Similar to graduated licensing, but before we give them the key, let's try and make them safer, and can we do that? So we need to stage the environment to match the needs. It's really difficult to take your first day learner onto a freeway doing 100 kilometers an hour. It's really not going to produce a safe outcome. And then the fifth in that group, when I hit the right button, is the calibration. And it came out at ICTDP last year in Brisbane, Australia, that the world is not self-calibrating themselves as drivers. So therefore, we're not passing that on to other drivers who are learning to self-calibrate. And it's a real key, because myself as any individual, I self-calibrate myself as a sportsman. If I don't kick the ball to the person, he tells me, and I quickly know that that's not working. So it's very important that we produce drivers who are able to calibrate, and the entire system calibrates itself. And for us, there's only one calibration, and it's Vision Zero. If it's not meeting Vision Zero, then we have to go back to the drawing board. So if we look at the driver coach and what we've done, is we've taken in a driving instructor who's more about tell, listen, obey, and we've turned this guy into, and for those who play sports or watch sports, the analogy is very simple, that the coach is motivator, he's driven by performance, he's a great communicator, certainly non-judgmental, listening, questioning, challenging. And the reality is that in the coaching philosophy, if you're not learning, the coach will change the method and how he delivers to you. So we have a forward coach, a back coach, an on-ball coach, depending on the football team scenario. And the coach changes his delivery to match the learning style of his client. Whereas under the instructional system, it was, this is what I do, and if you're not learning, perhaps you've got the problem. Well, we're going to switch that because it certainly makes it more effective. And coaches are there to pass on their knowledge, understanding that what we found is the instructional system in Australia developed a driver coach or an instructor with between 30 minutes and 2 hours in-car training. Yet we have an expectation that he's able to pass that on. He's not passing on a lot if he hasn't learnt a lot. And in the research we did through India and Cambodia and a lot of other overseas countries, including our own, we found that the instructional system is really under-preparing them for that ability to be imparters of knowledge. So the significant increase in knowledge to the educator allows them a really understanding of what they do, where they do it, why they do it, and what could go wrong and what they're doing correctly. So it's not a task, it's actually a bunch of processes. And we have this philosophy where we ask parents in our world, in America and New Zealand and other developed countries, that we ask parents to be the educator during that training time. We don't ask mum and dad to teach math, and I'm certainly glad they didn't ask me to teach my daughter math, or she wouldn't be able to do more than count. So we expect parents to be able to teach drivers ed just because they can drive, yet we don't expect them to teach any other subjects: swimming, maths, English, geography, whatever the subject may be. So we really need to change that instructor into a driver coach and significantly change the way they do that. So then we look at the delivery methodology, and we found that you'll see some pictures on your screen of some very highly effective coaches, including one of ours, Charles, on the right. And what we found is that if your delivery methodology uses that coaching and is delivered to a team or to an individual aimed at their learning style, they're going to change the outcome because you engage them, you motivate them, they're wanting to learn, and you've got so much more to pass on. And you don't measure success of your delivery methodology based on I said it. If they're not learning it and understanding it and able to turn that theory into an action, then there's a problem in your delivery methodology. So our educators or driver coaches measure themselves on the client's ability to turn theory into an action, or as Confucius once said, learnt is not learned until it produces an action. So it's not I told you and you said, yep, and then I went, oh, okay. I need to see you do it, because driving is a performance-based outcome. It's results-driven. And unless you can repeat that, understanding the graduated education system, you start off at a low level and then gradually move to a higher level of not just outside processing, but other distractions, because the modern cars, as we know, are highly distracted inside. So it's not just an external distraction, but you've also got now internal distractions to deal with. And in our country, it's called that mobile phone. That texting and driving is such a big problem. Because what it does is it takes not the eyes away, but also the brain, and that look but don't see. Us men are prone to it. It's called the fridge. It's on the second shelf. No, it's not. I can't see it. And oops, sorry. Look but don't see. So that, in a car driving term, is a developed system, and it's really interesting. So if we go then to the curriculum, and this is where an Australian government description of the curriculum, it sets out through content, descriptions, and achievement standards, hence standards, what students should be taught and achieve. At the moment, in their drive school, they're taught or told, they listen and obey, but when the instructor steps out, There's no learning, there's no memory. So we developed a curriculum with 797 units of competency. And that means for every road user, pedestrian, bike, car, truck, bus, we have a process that enables the driver to manage that system safely. And that does allow for human error, because I understand we are human. But if I'm trained really badly, then don't blame me. And the obvious example, we all know that when a team plays badly, it's not the team that gets replaced, it's a new coach that's brought in. And that's a really interesting thing, that it's not the team that we replace or blame so much, it's the coach. So change the coaching system and you'll have a better outcome. And it's really important globally, and having researched globally, we blame the humans, certain countries more than others, for their lack of driving ability, yet we don't really train them. And even here in Australia, we have learners passing a test that we've said to them is the test. And then when they have high crash rates, we're blaming them. Something seems amiss here. You know, lane changing is a basic bunch of processes that we can learn, and we as drivers, licensed, legal, and very many hours and years of driving, we're able to do safely. So surely we can pass that knowledge on. And that's where we're expecting parents to do that is really tough without a curriculum or an understanding. I certainly would have been shocked if my son or daughter's teachers had sent home the curriculum and said, Craig, can you do this? Because the answer would have been no. We then have roundabouts where it's a bunch of about 8 different items we manage simultaneously, and it's automating that process, understanding where the risks are, and then allowing time to automate the behaviour, and again, gradually increasing the complexity. We then have traffic lights with that dreaded T crash that Kevin mentioned earlier, and it does come out as a really strong crash rate, but it's really easily fixed in education. People need to learn patience, and one of the common things is that people will be sitting there with a blocked vision, and they'll go, oh, no one's coming, but they have a car in front, so their vision is only perhaps 2 to 3 seconds, but their journey takes 4 or 5. And they then think, well, there's no one coming, it must be safe. It's actually an education problem where we're not training them to actually have an effective process that they can recall. So we shouldn't really blame them. On the roadside, though, we have an intersection where the island is here and I'm here, and the oncoming vehicle has the same. So we get that crossover where both of us have impacted vision. They need to move the island to the other side. You'll see some slides on our website about it. It's quite an interesting dynamic. We then have crossroads where people say, and I call it the Thomas the Tank Engine system, I think I can, where they don't actually understand their journey takes X, that vehicle's going to be here and Y. Problem. Houston, we have an issue. So that speed and distance management is, again, a very easy system taught, but it's not being passed on. So people are kind of guesstimating whether or not it's safe to go, and the crossroad then shows up significantly. It's a much higher degree of thing to learn, but whether you've got Asperger's, engineer, autism, artist, introvert, extrovert, risk takers, or anxiety, the journey to learn that changes, but the outcome actually remains the same. And our training of these thousands of drivers with fleet and all those groups, it's really interesting how effective that system is. And then it's managing other traffic. You know, we have the rear end crash being the #1 crash on our road. Yet less than 1% of the drivers we surveyed manage actively the vehicle behind them using their rear mirror. And in fact, in India, the rear view mirror is often taken out of cars because people aren't taught to use it. So the curriculum really does need to change to a significantly different system. And it's understanding, bridging that gap between theory and the steering wheel, that there are a bunch of processes we need to do as drivers. The environment, and here's that delightful roundabout. What we don't want to do is go into that roundabout on your right when you're starting. We really should be looking at that early beginning roundabout. And that involves all parts in that graduated education system, which is going to feed into the graduated licensing system. Because let's stop expecting drivers to learn as they go. Because if that were true, I would say to every sports person, you'll be fine. You don't need to practice or learn and turn up to training and learn specific processes. Just turn up to the game on Saturday and you'll be fine. I am not supporting that team. So we need to really change the environment and match it to outcomes. And if someone's had a crash, going back to Ray's comments, we need to target that and say, well, listen, you've had this crash. It's as a result of this process not being automated and you not putting it into an action. So perhaps back to driver's ed and redo that module. This is a photo of my daughter, and it's about the calibration and how we calibrate success. Hello to my daughter, who's currently walking from Mexico to Canada across the Pacific Crest Trail in the US. Only 3,600 miles. It's a long way. Hello to my daughter somewhere on Earth. So we have a test that calibrates success based on a pass rate. Yet in Australia, we have that 40,000 serious injuries. We have 19,000 seriously injured P-platers a year, and we're saying the test is a success. Vision Zero says our test needs to be recalibrated, and perhaps we need to re-look at how that test is done and place it as part of a graduated education system. Vic Roads and here in Victoria have implemented or started going through something called Road Smart that you'll hear about. And this is perhaps a leading part of Australian road safety, in that potentially looking at changing the paradigm from an instruction to a coaching and gradually increasing the complexity, but we need to provide more help for parents and those delivering it. But it really look out for that Road Smart system coming out. So we have training, and remembering back to Confucius, I'll thank him for his wonderful wisdom, that learnt is not learned until it produces an action. So me saying to someone, do this, and them saying, yep, I understand it, it's a performance-based outcome. I need to see you repeat it, and not once, but again and again in a variety of environments. The driver coach has to take responsibility, not the client. If you're not learning, it is our problem. We will change that delivery to match your learning style. So the introvert, extrovert, and the engineer versus the artist are the easiest examples. The driving coach, he measures his success or calibrates his success against his client being crash-free in that first 6 months. Each training outcome must be assessed against a performance outcome in live and dynamic environments. And well, that leads perfectly into our next slide. So we have a 5-star driver education program, and it works on live and dynamic in a graduated education system. This picture doesn't represent that, because there's no live dynamic, there's no interaction, unless you're talking the very base of level 1. And the crashes in that GDE matrix don't happen at level 1 and 2, they're actually in 4 and 5. So we need to move beyond where we've developed these off-road training facilities. We're not using them as live and dynamic. You need to simulate reality in this. Because when you do that, you create a different environment. And the analogy I use is, it's like saying I'm a good sports team, but you've never played against an opposition. So myself being able to drive a car is about how I interact with others. And yes, humans make mistakes, but hey, I don't walk into people in shopping centres all day long. We tend to walk. And if you ever watch the matrix of how humans walk up and down busy streets, they're actually quite good at not hitting each other. So we need to produce that in a car sense. And that's one of the mistakes of the education model, is that I am steering my car, and the ability to steer my car does not make me a driver. I'm about an interactive process on a road, and I need to understand where the risks are coming from to be able to do that. Just to very quickly recap, it's got to be a coaching model, not an instruction. And the coaching methodology has to be matched to a learning style. You're not going to send an engineer in to teach year 2 art, because the class would go, well, hang on, what? And the engineer would go, why have you got so many colors in this room? It's got to be a graduated education system, and you're going to have to get them to level 3 and 4 in that GDE matrix, or you're only dealing with the task of steer the car, not where the crashes happen. The environments must be matched to the needs. And again, under that graduated education system, they have to evolve to a higher degree of internal and external management. And patience, you need to develop patience, because the humans, and especially the younger generation, have no patience. But it's a learnt module. And, you know, if you don't learn patience, you may end up becoming one. I would rather be patient and learn patience than become one. Said no one ever, let's go down to the hospital for dinner. We need to then get these results from these driver training orgs publishing their crash rates for clients post-license. We can successfully train drivers, and what we do is not just to where our own environment. We've trained a whole bunch of dynamic drivers from all categories, and they do learn very well. And we've trained drivers from overseas coming here on Indian, Asian, African, US, whatever the license may be, and even the English system, where they realize the instruction model really didn't equip them to be active participants. They were very much passive consumer. Do as you're told, listen to me, I will teach you and tell you everything. So thank you. Thank you, Cameron, Nadika. Forgive me if I've mispronounced the name, but I think it's Kanusha, Maruga here, Ray, and my fellow presenters. Thank you very much for your time. If you need any further or have any questions, my details are on the board, and I'm sure the facilitators will help. Thank you.